This pandemic has been going on for a long time, and I've had some interesting content in that period. A couple of years ago, I went the definitely appropriate route and did a review of the strategy game Plague Inc. Today we have another that is really on the nose with what they were going for and definitely 100% appropriate for this ongoing pandemic from COVID-19. An FPS filled with zombies, aliens, and loads of conspiracy theories. Here is my review of Pandemic Shooter for the Nintendo Switch. The plot here is centered around a crashing alien ship unleashing thousands, if not millions, of tiny lizard aliens that unleash a horrific virus, turning most of the world's population into mind-controlled zombies. It is up to you, a soldier, to take these zombies out with the help of your supportive female boss backing up your mission and also engaging in talk and jokes to keep things interesting. Now, I wouldn't call this game particularly good at storytelling, but very entertaining and humorous in what the developer was going for. The structure is all around making fun of and jabbing at conspiracy theories. Each chapter is built around a certain crazy theory people have had for years, from the moon being fake to the classic tinfoil hat. It even pokes fun at the more recent conspiracy theories surrounding COVID-19 and face masks, though modified to be in relation to the game's virus and not the real one. Even though the story here really isn't that good, the theories and banter between the protag and female boss make it interesting. While most of it is very childish jokes, there are some crazy things thrown in you might not know some people actually believe. There were a lot of situations where I would hear something like, "Don't listen to those crazy people that think drinking alcohol protects you from the virus." That made me wonder and go to Google trying to see if that was a real conspiracy theory and being very surprised when it was. With gameplay, this is an arcade-style first-person shooter. As you trek through each stage, you'll fight through waves of zombies, collecting weapons and power-ups as you search for the area's boss to move on to the next area. Now with game modes, there are really only two things you can do. Start game lets you go through the 8-level story mode with infinite or endless mode unlocking once you've beaten that story. The rest of the main menu is just for changing settings and viewing achievements, this game's version of a trophy system. Though the achievements do have a little more attached. Getting each one done will give you a bonus like longer buffs or increased stamina. But getting to story mode. You select a level, view a scene about a particular conspiracy theory, and are dropped into a 3D environment with the goal of getting from point A to point B, gunning down as many zombies as possible along the way. Progress through these areas is very simple and linear. There are very few alternate paths you can take, and those that do exist often just contain a dead end and power up you can grab for a temporary buff. As you go down these main paths, navigating and taking down enemies is in the form of waves. When you get to each fork in the road, a wave of zombies will spawn and run after you. Gunning them down will let you advance and move on to the next, and repeat the process throughout the stage. And when you get to the end, you'll find yourself trapped in an arena with a boss zombie. These bosses are similar, but have you fighting the boss and then waves of zombies they create when they generate shields around them. As you fight off all these zombies, you'll eventually get items from drops. Many will drop health and ammo, but some will also drop weapons in a bit of an RNG system. There are a bunch of weapons that can drop with different rarities, from simple pistols and rifles to the overpowered minigun that's usually only available when grabbing a particular power-up. And if you find a weapon you really like, go ahead and grab it and don't worry about ammunition. The ammo drops you get from enemies will be for whatever weapons you currently have on your person, not for just some random other thing. And you're never gonna run out of ammo. Once I got the minigun, I pretty much never stopped using it, and every time I finished a stage, I had way more than I started with. It went from 3K to 11K all the way up to over 40,000 bullets by the time I got through the last stage. Now the actual shooting is fairly standard with moving around a reticle and shooting different body parts for different amounts of damage. It looks and plays like a normal shooting game outside of there not being a down the sights view or a knife melee button. Though the shooting does feel a little clunky, mostly due to the controls, which I'll talk about a little bit later. What I dislike about the system is repetition, or rather variation. It's true that every stage is pretty much the same thing over and over, with walking through corridors, shooting down zombies, and then repeating the process. But it's more the variety of enemies and levels that really makes it feel repetitive. You essentially only have 2 stages that are repeated for the entire game. The first half is basically just in the same city map over and over again, but with different environmental items to fit the story theme like vaccine bottles or insect hives. Thankfully, you do get some underground levels later in the game, but they're essentially the same underground levels over and over, and all lead back to that same city level for the ending and boss. It also doesn't help that they stop introducing new enemy types about 3 levels in, so you'll constantly be fighting the same enemies in the same areas. Even the bosses don't feel that unique, as they're just bigger versions of a random normal enemy. And I say random because I did a few replays of the final mission and found that the enemy type used for the boss changed every time I failed and retried from the last checkpoint. Now, this isn't a massive deal considering the game's price tag of $5, but it would be wise to not play the whole game in one sitting. Speaking of, let's go into content and length. From start to finish, I managed to complete the story mode in a little over 5 hours. That's only about $1 for each hour of content, so that's not bad at all, even considering there's not really a post-game outside of Infinite mode. Next up are controls. I don't have a problem with the control scheme. It is a little bit weird with L being the reload button, but it's more that the controls feel clunky. The sensitivity is a bit off for aiming, and there is a lot of lag and delay. Shooting and reloading don't really have any issues, but aiming has considerable lag from all controller types. I played this game with my Nixie wireless joypads, standard Joy-Cons, docked mode, and handheld mode, and there was almost a full second of delay between moving the right analog stick and the aim starting to move in all scenarios. But that's all I've got for controls, so let's talk about presentation. Visually, I think the game looks okay. It's got a cel-shaded style to it, which definitely helps out. There are a fair number of jaggies around, but it's not that bad. The first issue here, though, is audio. The vocal audio in cutscenes and gameplay is very different. Not only is the voice audio much louder in gameplay, but the microphones sound like they were distorting and peaking as they spoke into them. And the bigger problem, performance. Load times are fine, but frame rate slowly goes down the further into the game you get. The first few levels have a pretty smooth 30 FPS with dips here and there, but the further you get and bigger zombie waves show up, it drops a lot. By level 6, I was seeing the FPS in the 20s and even down in the teens on a regular basis. And when I got to the final stage, it was borderline slideshow territory. I had a really big struggle just trying to finish the final stage. Now, you can help this by exiting out of the stage and re-entering, and you will get much better performance when you restart. But by the time you get back to that boss, it'll be right back to that slideshow level of lag. But that's all I've got to say for performance, so let's go into battery life. Pandemic Shooter gives the original model a battery range of 3 hours and 22 up to 4 hours and 57. The Nintendo Switch Lite gets a range of 3 hours and 40 up to 5 hours and 3. The Redboxer V2 2019 model gets a range of 5 hours and 54 up to 7 hours and 12. And the OLED model gets a range of 6 hours and 11 up to 7 hours and 38. In conclusion, Pandemic Shooter is a funny little story that jabs at a ton of conspiracy theories old and new. Unfortunately, it is a repetitive and massively unoptimized shooter that starts fine but gets to slideshow levels of frame drops by the end. It's a neat little concept, especially for only $5, but needs a lot of work. Reviews to go rates Pandemic Shooter for the Nintendo Switch a 3.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.